Oxford United because this is a message to the EFL, an important message to the English Football League and the association and the people that basically are in charge of the decisions that are being made at this association should definitely be looking at themselves and starting to make some right decisions. And they've sort of gone about it in the wrong way, sort of not being a testing teams, make clear signs that there's been an outbreak in a team, we will not pay for your testing. Making some pretty dodgy decisions. Everything they set out to do this season is now, and you like what you hear and you agree with me, share this and hopefully we can grow this and more people can hear this. Obviously I understand we're on 89 subscribers at the moment, so this is a very small podcast, a very small channel in a huge platform. Games due to coronavirus, that should be the case for every team. It should not be we have to forfeit games. If you have players with coronavirus, that is a problem and that should be rearranged. It's not their fault they've got players with coronavirus. It's the EFL that should deal with it responsibly, and they're simply not. They have so far failed to do. Hello everybody and welcome back to the Young Fan Podcast. It is currently Thursday as I'm recording this episode of the podcast. Whether or not this comes out on Thursday, of course, I'm not too sure. But this is a very different episode of the podcast. It's not a preview. It's not a match reaction. It's not a update of what's going on at Oxford United. It's not the transfer window special, which should be coming out and definitely should be being recorded very, very soon. Of course, the window for EFL clubs closes tomorrow at 5 p.m. So it's very, very important that all the deals get over the line there as well. I'm not going to be discussing any more of that now for Oxford United because this is a message to the EFL, an important message to the English Football League and the association and the people that basically are in charge of the decisions that are being made at this association should definitely be looking at themselves and starting to make some right decisions on not necessarily what's in the news and what's the big issue at the moment, because I feel like that is another issue that we've got. Obviously, Project Big Picture is something that at the moment looks a severe doubt. It looks like it's not being backed. It looks like it's not going to happen from that point of view, and from what I'm looking at now on Thursday, which is the 15th. It looks very unlikely that's going to happen, but that's not our discussion today. It is sort of in sort of areas of that, because I think that is sort of being quite dominant when actually, if you look beyond that, there are definitely more issues in the EFL that's happening right now. Of course, the Project Big Picture has very, very big benefits for EFL clubs. It does also have its issues as well, as does anything like that. Something that when you do restructure such a big thing, and something that's been structured like this for such a long time, it does have, of course, its negatives. Of course it does. Everything like that will. There are big positives, of course there are, for the EFL clubs and for the Premier League clubs as well. But I also think there are problems at the moment that are sort of being maybe left a bit behind and maybe swept under the carpet, which is something that I feel like we should be speaking out as fans. And this isn't just Oxford United, this is every single club in the EFL at the moment. I did sort of mention it last time, but this is sort of a real message to the EFL. And if you're watching this now and you like what you hear and you agree with me, share this and hopefully we can grow this and more people can hear this. Obviously I understand we're on 89 subscribers at the moment, so this is a very small podcast, a very small channel in a huge platform talking about a big thing. But if you obviously understand and agree with what I'm trying to say here, this is not me pointing the finger at any specific football club, because it isn't a club's fault. I am speaking more as an Oxford fan because it's happened to us, which I think we've been fairly untreated. So I think Crewe have also been fairly untreated as well. And I'm sort of going to be looking at both sides of the situation as well. So if you're a Crewe fan watching this, or you're an Oxford fan watching this, I don't want this to come across as a disrespectful way. I also don't want this to come across as Jack sort of just being coming here on the podcast, basically just to talk and sort of just get his frustration out that we've had a postponed game 2 weeks in a row. That isn't what I want. That isn't my intention. That isn't I'd never do that. I'd never want to put that online. I'd never want to put that as an episode of the podcast. We're a very positive podcast. It's a young fan having a footballing opinion, and this is definitely opinion-based, but also I'm going to be speaking as many facts I possibly can as well, because I understand when I'm putting an argument out to a big association like the EFL, I've got to back it up with facts. I've also got to back it up with an honest opinion and an honest feeling coming from myself. So this is not disrespectful. This is actually should be come across as a respectful thing, because I feel like as clubs we should definitely be supported during this horrible virus in which many people are suffering from. And I also want to take that as way. Football is not as important, of course it isn't, as of course people that are suffering from this horrible virus that is causing huge problems across the world. And obviously at the moment here in the UK, that's where I know it the best, that's where I live, so that is obviously where I'm hearing most about it. But of course it is a problem across the world, of course it is, and this is me basically just looking at the football side of it as well. But I understand of course that it is affecting lots of people in many different ways, but this is me talking about the football, especially the lower leagues in football as well, and sort of the EFL in how I think they're dealing with this whole thing very, very badly. I do think there are some really good people in the EFL, and again, this is not me just completely slating the EFL. I think the EFL have done things like this big project, big picture. I think it's a good idea, and if the EFL can do something like this, I feel like that is a big, big positive, and I will 100% be the first person to sort of congratulate them on sort of finalising such a big thing for these clubs. I just feel there's lots of things that EFL are doing wrong at the moment in which could come back to bite them and will really, really suffer and really hurt these clubs as well. As fans of lower league clubs, and this is not just me, this is millions of people that are supporting of the lower league clubs in England, we should not be feeling like every day our club could be in problems and in big issues, and we should feel like the EFL are backing us up and are behind us when things do start going wrong. I understand, of course, the sort of the Premier League clubs as well are giving funding out to these clubs, which I think is very, very good, very, very nice. They didn't have to do that. We're very, very generous for that. I just think the EFL could be doing more, and that is what we're going to be discussing today. And we're going to be sort of mainly discussing them behind. We are going to be discussing a situation that happened at Oxford United versus Crewe being postponed twice, and why I think the EFL have gone about this so wrong. And first of all, I'd like to clear up about this is not an Oxford fault, this is not a Crewe Alexandra fault, Alexandra fault, and this is not a fault of any specific club in the league. This is the league that is making this it just isn't working very well at the moment, and this is what we're going to be discussing. Ultimately, we need answers. That is the problem we've had for so many. It's just the main problem. We've got lots of questions, we've got lots of things that need to be sorted out, but none of them being answered. We've got the EFL knowing full well that this is what is going on. I understand they've got Project Big Picture on the side, which is important, but surely we should be focusing, and surely they should be focusing on something that is clearly causing problems now. I understand there are big benefits of Project Big Picture that will benefit clubs like us, and that will benefit Oxford United, will benefit Crewe, will benefit lots of clubs across the EFL. But I also feel as well this is a problem. This is an issue that's happening now. The Project Big Picture is something that looks like it's not going to happen. To be honest with you, it looks like it wasn't going to happen. So why are we still focusing on? I focus on that, but what we need to do as well, focus on something that is happening now. We have now had multiple games being called off in the EFL with very poor explanation from the EFL, and then simply not doing much about it. For me, it just seems like there's one rule for one team and another rule for another. There has been games on Saturday where teams have asked to postpone the game. We can't play the game. We've got players with coronavirus. We've got a very, very bad an issue at this specific football club. And some teams are being allowed this to happen. Some teams are not being allowed this to happen. A club at the weekend were asked for the game to be postponed, and the EFL simply responded with no. If you do choose not to play the game, it will count as a forfeit, and you'll lose the game 3-0, and the opposition will get the win, which confused me a lot, because we've now got a situation where teams can sort of approach the EFL and be like, we've got an issue, we've got players coronavirus, which is 100% an issue, 100% a problem. But what the EFL are failing to do is keep it consistent. If you're allowing one team not to play their game, and you're happy for it to be then rearranged, it should be rearranged, and that should be the same for everyone. So it shouldn't be that one team can just ask for this game to be postponed and then go, no, you can't. It's got to be a forfeit. I also understand as well there are details we don't know. The team that asked that and they said come out the forfeit, there could have been a detail in there that maybe made it so it was fair to forfeit, but it doesn't look great. It does not look great on the EFL if they're just having one team have one thing and another team having another. It doesn't seem very fair. It doesn't seem like all the sort of same teams are on a level playing field whatsoever. We'll be coming on to a team, a sort of an opposition team in a little bit. But for me, if that was me and we've asked, and this was Oxford United that asked for a game to be postponed, when I'd seen that another team had asked and it had been postponed and been allowed to rearranged, and they came back and said, no, you have to play your games, you have to play youth players, you have to go out and have big first team players not in the squad because they have the virus, I'd then expect my game to then be postponed. I wouldn't expect them to come back and be like, no, you'll lose the game 3-0 if you choose not to play. It doesn't seem very right to me. It doesn't seem fair, which is the problem at the EFL, and everyone else speaks about the EFL. It's meant to be a fair ruling for each team in the competition. Every team competing in the leagues, in Championship, League 1, League 2, have to be and have a fair playing field with a very fair board of the EFL above them. Now, to me, this doesn't seem very fair. You can disagree if you sort of feel otherwise. But to me, if you've got one rule for one team, one rule for another, it doesn't matter what league you're in. It doesn't matter how many players have got coronavirus. If you've got a team with players that have the virus, surely it should then be the same for other teams in the EFL. It doesn't seem too fair to me. It doesn't seem fair on any team. You know, it just seems wrong from the EFL there. Some teams are allowed to postpone, some teams aren't. You know, it's the way of life. It's a simple rule of life. If this is a fair playing field, and you say something to one person, but you say someone with the exact same issue another reason, when you've just given this other person with the same issue or the same problem or the same scenario an answer different to someone else, then that isn't fair. The whole point of being fair is you give the same response and the same look on the situation as somebody else. So that isn't, that doesn't show anything here with the EFL, with these sides at the moment. It doesn't seem fair. I know it hasn't really directly affected Oxford, and it may have not directly affected your team, but I'm looking at it as somebody that if this was directly affected to me and my team, same with you as well, I would feel like I have either been treated really unfairly, or I'd feel quite guilty. The fact that I know that another team has been allowed to forfeit the game, has been forced to forfeit a game, or had to play the game with players with coronavirus where another team hasn't in the same situation. I think I feel a bit guilty behind that. And I think that's something to really look into. But anyway, that's it as well. I am going to mention funding for testing as well, because I understand that is another situation that needs to be addressed. There needs to be something behind that as well. That's another issue. I mean, how can you make it so that these specific teams have to take money out of their own empty banks anyway because of the coronavirus situation and say, we're not going to look after the health of these players with testing. We're going to make you pay, and we're going to make your team pay for your team's testing. The only time the EFL have paid for testing is when an issue like this has come up. So when a team have played against another team and it's this, and there's been cases of coronavirus, and they've allowed funding for these teams or the opposition team to test, and they have paid for that. But last week, Oxford United had a situation where they had players unwell. They had players that weren't very well. It turns out they came back negative, which is fantastic. Of course it is. But there'd be situations where teams come back positive and they're not being tested. Same situation with a Crewe player 2 weeks ago. Crewe didn't let him play, didn't fund him. The EFL didn't fund him. No one were able to fund this player with a test, so he had to go and get his own and pay for his own private test and get his own private test outside of football. Technically, it was outside of the footballing world. I mean, I don't understand how that can possibly be fair. If you're the EFL looking at, it's taking this coronavirus situation seriously, and you're looking at the health of the players as your first priority, the only reason why this league started again, and the only reason why the season started again, was because they promised that the health would come first for these players, which should 100% be the same for anyone, not just in football, but their health should come first. Health should come first, and then football should come second. To me, this isn't health coming first. This is sort of, we can't play the game, lads, so we'll just rearrange it some other time. You don't feel very well? Well, unless we've got clear signs that there's been an outbreak in a team, we will not pay for your testing. Now, there's been no words from the EFL that that's the case, but I'm putting two and two together here. Oxford United had players coming in unwell. The EFL must have been told that they had players coming in unwell. It turns out they didn't have the virus, but they were still coming in ill. Our captain, Cameron Brannigan, this season, didn't feel very well on the Friday, the Thursday, and missed training on the Friday. Obviously, he's carried on not feeling very well on that time. We couldn't give him a test. We could not give him a test because we couldn't afford to do that. We had to fund our own testing. We had to go out of our way and test our own, which is great. And that could go out of our own way sounds like we're being hard done by to get a test. It's good that we did do the testing. It sounds ungrateful in a sense, but should we really be needing to come out of our empty bank anywhere, and our problem, maybe not empty, but our sort of tinted and sort of smashed piggy bank of money that has already been affected from the virus because of the many reasons, but mainly because fans aren't allowed into grounds, etc. Should we be taking money out of that to be worrying about the health of the players, and not just at Oxford, but of other teams as well? If we get a test for one player, well, technically we should be testing every single player of every single team, no matter who they are, and no matter who they play for. The health should come first. The moment, I don't think the health is coming first. So testing for the EFL needs to be addressed. And with that as well, real answers need to be questioned to these real answers. Because at the moment we've got hundreds and hundreds of questions from testing, from postponing games, from when we do postpone games. Are there any real answers from the EFL other than a little paragraph that's sort of saying, pretty, well written words? But does that really answer the problem we've got at the moment? Does that really sort of solve the issue we've got? The issue we've got is that we've got no answers, we've got limited funding, and everyone seems to be too worried at the EFL about something that could have happened. The project big picture, I keep messing that up, could have happened and still might happen. Hopefully it does. It has many benefits. I'm not trying to sort of stamp that down and sort of pretend like that isn't a big thing. It is. But that is something that could have happened. And could happen. This is happening now. The coronavirus has been happening for a long time. Football had a long time without it being happening on the pitch. I understand they didn't have a quick turnaround from last season to this season. But surely people should be sort of giving answers to these teams. As a club, we should be having and hearing definitive answers. Whether it comes out to the public, it doesn't really matter. Whether I come on a podcast and say, yeah, we've heard from the EFL, they're saying this, and this. It doesn't really matter, but the club should. If Oxford United came out and said we've had definitive answers about the Crewe postponement, about the testing, about all these different sort of situations that are going wrong, about one rule for one team, one rule for another. If they were definitive answers from the club, but from what we know, it doesn't seem like we're getting any answers whatsoever. It just seems like they're going. They seem like we're there. The clubs are giving as much information as the fans as well. Now, to be honest with you, I'm not asking for EFL to email me after this podcast because obviously they won't, and obviously this won't get the views that obviously that the EFL would ever need to watch this, and they probably won't watch it anyway. But if Oxford or Crewe or whoever team it is, Blackpool, Portsmouth, whoever it is in this league and in League Two as well, whether it's Tranmere, whether in Championship it is Derby, whoever it is, that's just names off the top of my head. That's no specific names there that mean any relevance to what I'm talking about. I'm just naming teams. If those clubs came out to the media and came out to the fans and said, we've had answers, we can all sit back and be like, they've been given answers. We don't expect an essay about what's going to happen as fans. Some people do, some people don't. To be honest with you, I just want the best from everyone's clubs. And I don't really, if this was happening to Wigan, I'd still be making this episode of the podcast. If this happened to Portsmouth, I'd still be making this episode of the podcast. This is an issue that's happening and will affect your team, unfortunately, eventually if things aren't sorted out at the EFL. So whoever this is, and whoever's making these decisions, has got to take more responsibility. Because at the moment they're taking zero responsibility, and if they are taking responsibility, it doesn't look great on their behalf whatsoever. We need answers, and we're not getting them. If the EFL had actually explained some decisions behind post games with evidence, then I think it's fine. If it's evidence to the clubs, whether it's evidence to the fans, but whoever is giving those evidence, if they're given that evidence, that's fine. We can move on from that, and we can say that you know that's an issue. We sort it out. But we seem to just get this sort of robotic, and it's not robotic. Obviously, someone has actually written this, but a robotic response every time a game is postponed. Following the consultation with the EFL, Crewe Alexandra, this is the one for Oxford United, Crewe Alexandra has decided that our game with Oxford United this evening should be postponed. So how can Crewe just decide whether this game should be postponed? Surely it should be the EFL deciding whether this is postponed, and that's not a dig at Crewe. In fact, that's a bit of a dig at the EFL, to be honest, because shouldn't it be Crewe that's consulting in the EFL? And shouldn't Crewe be the one saying, this is the reason why we can't play the game, this is the evidence, this is the problem, we feel that we shouldn't be playing the game, which is fine. Every team should have that option to explain their decision. Of course they are. In any argument, that should be the case. And when you want something done, you should obviously back it up with evidence. I want to win the lottery with no evidence. You know, I think we all want to win the lottery. If you back it up with some actual facts, we want to postpone this game because we want to postpone this game. We want to postpone the game against Peterborough this weekend because we could get beaten by them. You know, what? If you give some actual evidence behind the reason why you want to make these decisions, it's fine. And that's what Crewe have done. They clearly have gone to the EFL and said, we have got an issue with coronavirus in our squad. We want this game to be postponed. Now, the EFL then should then really be seriously consulting this and being like, giving reasons and giving answers. Surely EFL should be the ones making the decision. I guess they are making the decision, but surely it should be EFL. The way they've written this, that Crewe have decided that our game should be postponed. That was the one that came out to the fans. Everyone has seen that. That was not an Oxford statement on the Oxford social media and the Oxford side of things. That was the same one for Oxford, Crewe, and for EFL. So surely EFL should be making the ultimate decision at the end of this. Surely it shouldn't be the way it just makes it sound like the Crewe have just rang up the EFL and said we want the game to be postponed. The EFL have gone, why? Coronavirus? Yeah, we'll postpone it for you. Don't worry about it. But on Saturday they got the green light to play the game, and EFL were just ringing up and just answering the phone, going, nah, sorry lads, you're gonna have to play the game or else it's forfeited. So I'm not. This is not, as an Oxford fan, this can easily be a way of being like, we feel ultimately the reason why I'm doing this is we feel like we should get the win against Crewe and they should be forfeited. That's not the case. But if you're going to ask some team to forfeit on one side, you should be able to forfeit on the other side. And if you're going to put out a statement like that, that could mean anything. Following the consultation with the EFL, Crewe Alexandra have decided that our game with the Oxford United this evening should be postponed. Should be postponed. To me, it just seems a bit. It seems a bit like they've sort of been like, the EFL have been a bit like, this probably isn't the case, but for the way this looks, it's like EFL don't really want to be responsible for this. It's like, you know, we sort of spoke about it, but Crewe Alexandra have decided. It's the EFL. You're in charge of every team in these leagues. Why are you not making the optimum decision? And why is it not the EFL have decided to postpone the game against Crewe and Oxford United? I understand if they have players that have coronavirus in the squad, the game could be postponed because that is not, of course, that of course is then risking the health of other teams. But teams in other leagues, and in the EFL as well, have players in their squad with coronavirus. Obviously not playing, but have had players in the squad with coronavirus, but have had to play with youngsters, with players that would normally be playing, unless they forfeit the game. But here it's like, well, yeah, they don't have to play, and the EFL have been like, they've decided. You know what I mean? It's like the kids at school have decided that they will have an inset day. What? So you're telling me that the kids have just knocked on the head teacher's door and gone, we fancy an inset day this Friday, and the head teacher's gone, that's fine. That's fine, lads. I think we should have an inset day. You know, we'll consult the decision, but ultimately it was the kids' decision. They think they'd written on the newsletter or on the website of the school. We following the consultation with the kids. The kids have decided. Sorry, with the head teacher, the kids have decided we're going to have an inset day on Friday. It's the other way round. It should be following the consultation with the evidence that Crewe have provided. The EFL have decided to postpone the game. I mean, what sort of answer is that? It looks embarrassing on the EFL. You know, I mean, it just doesn't look very good. And again, this should be the case for anything. Take Oxford, take Crewe out of this. If that was given with any other team, it just looks dodgy on the EFL. It looks horrific. I mean, this is something that happened that's been given by Wigan. Wigan said Beckles. This was a Wigan written article, so of course this was Wigan who played against Crewe at the weekend. So in sort of a timeline of events, Oxford United versus Crewe was postponed the Saturday before last. Then the last Saturday, Crewe were allowed to play their game at the weekend. So a week later, they were allowed to play their game against Wigan, which they won 3-0. And the players that were sort of not allowed to play against Oxford, because obviously they had the virus, which is good. It was good they weren't allowed to play, of course, so that's putting other players at risk. That was a good decision. They were allowed to play again on Saturday because they were allowed to play on Saturday, and they won the game 3-0. And now 3 days later, the EFL have decided to have allowed them to postpone the game. Now, I understand Crewe's argument of they weren't allowed to play, but to me, the EFL have sort of been a little bit. How can you give Crewe the green light on Saturday, and then Crewe fans are looking? Imagine if Crewe fans were travelling to Oxford on Tuesday night. You wouldn't be able to do that. This is quite a long. It's quite a far trek from Crewe to Oxford, and this decision was made about 3 hours before kick-off on Tuesday. The fans probably would have had to start travelling to Oxford if they were coming from Crewe to watch this game, if fans were allowed back in stadiums. And the EFL have gone, lads, we'll just call it off. The decisions seem a little bit like a bit flip-floppy. They seem a little bit rushed. They seem a little bit. There's no evidence with us, and it's not just me, and it's not just the fact that they're not getting evidence. Clearly, lots of managers across every team have got the same issue. One sort of really key part as well, Ian Holloway, I think it is Ian Holloway, I'm really sorry if it's not that, I think it is that, who is the manager of Grimsby Town, came out and did a fantastic interview with, I think it was Sky, just speaking about his take and his view on this whole situation about the EFL and clubs not being backed in the EFL. He mainly spoke about sort of the fact that these clubs could be risked to not stay afloat and obviously then eventually and horrifically sort of fall apart and turn into just basically not exist anymore. But it's some really key points about how, and it's clear to see that even managers of clubs that are under the EFL are speaking out about the issues at this club. Now, I don't know if the Crewe manager has spoken about this. I know Carl Robinson, our Oxford United manager, spoke to Sky about it. Obviously, I know Ian spoke about it, Grimsby manager as well. Lots of managers are speaking about the EFL and how as clubs, they are not being given the answers and the backing from the people that should be backed, that should be backing these clubs. It just seems at the moment, it's the clubs that have got the issues, and the EFL are sort of a bit like, we're a bit busy at the moment, we're concentrating on Project Big Picture, which might happen one day, but we're not going to concentrate on something that's happening now. Games are being postponed now. If they haven't realised yet, they have been postponing games and have been saying to other teams, you've got to forfeit, and some teams you can postpone. They're making flip-flop decisions, but their only really sort of excuse they could give out is, we're concentrating on something else that could benefit you. It's just a bit like, why are you moaning about this when Project Big Picture could be something fantastic for your club and you can get so much money per club? But it's like, yeah, but that isn't happening now. We're on about things that are actually affecting us now, and obviously Wigan fans are not happy. Obviously they had to play their game at the weekend against Crewe and they lost 3-0. And now Crewe are not playing on Tuesday, which is 3 days later. So how did their game get a green light on the weekend but not on Tuesday? Now obviously this is the fact that they've said the word green light suggests to me that the EFL have made that decision. The EFL have said you're allowed to play that game. How can the EFL say you can play on the weekend but you can't play on Tuesday night? Surely if there's any precaution and any issue, they should not be able to play at the weekend. Because to me it seems like if there's an issue like that, and an issue that Crewe maybe thought that was going to happen, the EFL maybe sort of thought that something wasn't right there, they should have said, we're going to postpone your game on Tuesday, we're going to postpone your game the next Saturday, and then you can play against next Saturday. Because then the 2 games after this incident, that means 3 games for Crewe are then called off, and then of course, you can play And then you can play the following weekend as well, because that then gives you basically the 2 weeks that you should be allowed then, and the players should be fine. I don't understand how it works in football about this isolation thing and all of that. I mean, if Wintle and it's Beckles, if I'm saying that right, had the virus and weren't allowed to play on last Saturday against Oxford, where the original fixture was, do they isolate just for a week and just play against Wigan? I don't understand how that works. I don't think that is a broken rule, but to me, for us, it's a 2 week isolation. I think for the members of the public. Obviously, I understand football is different, but so they were allowed to play on Saturday, but they can't play on Tuesday. Now, this is not me again, just sort of digging Crewe. This is not that. It's the EFL again making some weird decisions there. I don't understand how this really works. Surely the game should just be postponed and then postponed if there's an issue. Not you can play on Saturday if you're fine, and then if you just don't, if something happens, call us on Tuesday and we'll sort something out for you. When there's teams that are calling up the EFL saying we have an issue, can we postpone the game like you did to Crewe versus Oxford? And they go, nah. Sounds fair to me. The original was I'm just literally reading my specific. I've sort of like bullet point different notes about this. The original gate fixture was going to happen with it. Yeah. So another issue that obviously came out that I did speak about briefly in sort of the talk I did sort of in sort of the recap week at Oxford was there was a known Crewe player that had the virus. That did actually have the virus and was with the squad in the hotel. Then obviously found out he had the virus in the hotel. He was contacted, and Crewe were then from the way Carl Robinson suggested that Crewe were happy to play the game. Now I understand why that was the case. I sort of do. No, this isn't this. It's been taken a few ways. Some Oxford fans have taken the side of Crewe basically being disrespectful and playing the game. I wouldn't take that sort of side. I don't know. I have a feeling that Crewe wouldn't do that. I don't think Crewe would go to the game knowing they've had a player with the squad and in the camp with the virus and were just happy to play the game. I'm thinking that what actually happened was Crewe have let Oxford know, and Crewe have maybe said we can play the game if you want, and Oxford have gone no. We're not going to do that. Some now Crewe fans were saying that we decided to postpone the game. Well, I mean, technically we did decide to postpone the game, but that is generally just because we didn't really want to have a game against Crewe with players on your team, on Crewe's team that had the virus. That wouldn't be very sensible if I were you. I mean, that's like playing, that sort of is like going against every rule that the government have put out for the public. All we hear from the public, which is rightly given advice of, stay safe, and if you have the virus, you should not obviously be put in contact with other people, and that would be going completely against that. So technically, yeah, we did postpone the game, but hopefully for a good reason. There was clear evidence that Crewe had a player that had coronavirus. Now, I'm not sure if evidence has really come out about Crewe having a sort of an outbreak or anything about the reason why the game on Tuesday was postponed. I'm not sure, but the reason why Crewe and Oxford game was originally postponed was one that was quite strange. Obviously, the EFL then didn't do too much about that one. I mean, we had to actually consult with the EFL and say, this is actually happening. Should we play the game? And obviously, then they might have been like, I can. From what it looks like, they probably would have gone, no, don't play the game, obviously. But it doesn't seem like the decision was actually was going to be made anyway. Obviously, EFL officials would be at the game, and this wasn't actually this is what happens when you don't test players. It's clearly what happens when you don't test players. If you don't test them, how are clubs meant to know whether they can play the games? And how can Crewe feel like, how can Crewe be like, we can play the game if you don't test them? It turns out they had 4 players with the virus anyway. So if Oxford United had said, we'll play it anyway, then obviously we would have, that was the real risk of spread. And that's what happens if you don't test players. It's what happens if you don't fund these teams that can test these players, because you have issues like this that are happening now with many teams, and not just Oxford and Crewe. So it is a really difficult situation for these different clubs. I think the way that Crewe have gone about it and the way that Oxford have gone about it has actually been combined very well compared to the way the EFL have gone about it. The actual 2 individual clubs involved have done a really good job and have done better than the people above them that should be making decisions for them. It seems as though Oxford made the decision that it wasn't a great idea to play the game when they had players with the virus, which is good. And it seems as though Crewe have sort of made, the Crewe have made a decision not to play on Tuesday. Whether or not that's the right decision or the wrong decision, they still made the decision that the game wasn't allowed to play. Now, obviously, it comes out that the EFL would have to have a say in that and would have to consult that. That's what the statement says. But Crewe made the decision, as said in that statement, to postpone the game. Now, I obviously 100% believe in my heart of heart. I do not want. I actually respect every team in the leagues. I'd always say that, but to me, it doesn't look great on the EFL, and it looks like they've sort of gone against everything that they've set out to do in this sort of Project Restart thing of this new season. Obviously, Project Restart was last season, but I guess this is still sort of Project Restart because it is sort of restarting the season again this season. And they've sort of gone about it in the wrong way, sort of not being a testing teams, making some pretty dodgy decisions. Everything they set out to do this season, they have so far failed to do. Everything that they have set out, that they said they were going to do first, which was health first, they have failed to do. And no one can argue about that. When they postpone games due to coronavirus, that should be the case for every team. It should not be we have to forfeit games. If you have players with coronavirus, that is a problem and that should be rearranged. It's not their fault they've got players with coronavirus. It's the EFL that should deal with it responsibly, and they're simply not. They're simply doing one rule for one team and one rule for the other. So, it doesn't look great. It does not look great. Now, the game has been rearranged. I'm just getting some stuff now. Oxford United's third attempt to host Crewe Alexandra will be Tuesday the 17th at 7 p.m. So obviously that is now November the 17th, sorry. That's literally next month. So it's literally now nearly a month away. I mean, that is unbelievable. The fact that this game is now being had to be played nearly a month later, just under a month later. So, yeah, it is being rearranged. The game will not be given. It won't be a 3 points. It won't be a forfeit. It will be rearranged. But let's put it that way. It's proof here that the game against Crewe will now take place on Tuesday, which is another reason why. How can you how can this be the case that these games are being rearranged 3 times, but teams in other leagues and in the same league as well are asking to postpone their game, but they have replied with no. It doesn't seem fair to me. I feel bad for those teams, and I also feel bad for Oxford and Crewe because they've now had to play this game 3 times in a row. If I was a Crewe player, if I was an Oxford player, if I was a Crewe member of their team and a Crewe official, and if I was an Oxford official, I just want this game to be played now, boys, because to be honest with you, the EFL have tried to ruin this fixture so many times with some horrendous decisions along the way. Thank you very much for listening to this episode of the podcast. Sorry it's not a positive one. We do positive ones here on the podcast. If you're new to this episode of the new to this podcast, the Young Fan Podcast, leave a like, subscribe to the Young Fan Podcast YouTube channel. We are 11 subscribers away from 100 subscribers. If we get that by the end of the year, that would be fantastic. Thanks for listening to the episode of the podcast. If you agree with my sort of decision, agree with the issue at the EFL at the moment, please do leave a like and subscribe and give your opinion on this decision down below as well. Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you later.